Okay. Good morning. Hearing will come to order. I want to thank our witnesses for being here. And we're here today to continue this committee's longstanding oversight of federal procurement initiatives impacting small businesses. This committee has long advocated for policies that ensure a strong industrial base. As we all know, small businesses play a critical role in increasing competition, innovation, and stimulating our economy. However, the industrial base has shrunk by as much as 27% over the last decade, even as total dollar amounts awarded to small businesses remain level. Past federal spending initiatives applying contract consolidation principles have contributed to this decline. The current federal spending management framework, also known as category management, proposed by the Office of Management and Budget, raises some of these concerns of the past. While category management can be useful in tracking the federal government's purchasing habits in order to identify efficiencies and keep contracting costs down, the proposed plan may be problematic. There is great concern among the small business community that recent efforts steering spending towards best-in-class contracting vehicles will restrict competition and significantly reduce opportunities for the majority of small businesses. Current category management efforts seem to benefit few to the detriment of many. In the struggle to simplify and manage federal spending, the federal government should not lose sight of its responsibility to maximize opportunities for small businesses, nor should it disregard the impact that this may have on the industrial base. Merely paying lip service to the small business community is not enough. The federal government should take proactive steps to ensure the majority of small businesses can thrive in this new environment. I'd like to thank our witnesses for being here this morning and for their expert testimony that we'll hear shortly. And I would now like to yield to the ranking member, Ms. Velasquez, for her opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for holding this important hearing. Our committee has long acknowledged small businesses' critical role in the $500 billion a year federal marketplace. When small firms are awarded federal contracts, the result is a win-win. The government and the taxpayer receive good value for their money, as small companies have the dexterity to provide high-quality supplies and services at competitive prices. It, therefore, comes as no surprise to those in this room that small businesses are at the heart of the government supply chain. Recent data demonstrate that the average contract size is increasing, meaning more revenues for small companies if they get those contracts. However, this trend also suggests that more contracts are being consolidated, resulting in fewer opportunities for small businesses. I am particularly interested in hearing witnesses' perspective on this phenomenon. More broadly, numerous policies and protections have been implemented to ensure small firms' continued participation in government contracting. Many of these initiatives have evolved over the years to reflect the changing needs of small firms. One such evolution is the adoption of strategic sourcing and category management. Category management is a broad concept used to optimize acquisition vehicles, processes, and knowledge available to best address agencies' needs and generate savings. There are concerns that despite any benefits, this model could result in greater consolidation and bundling of contracts and a reduction in the usage of the federal schedule system. While category management is built as the strategy to get agencies the lowest price, our committee has heard the contrary at previous hearings. Vendors on the multiple award schedule continually provided lower prices than those offered by category management contract holders. Yet, agencies and contracting officers cannot take advantage of lower prices because some category management vehicles have become mandatory by their agency. The current course of this administration is increasing the number of agencies heading in this direction. There is added concern that the best-in-class criteria poses a threat to emerging businesses that do not have the past performance to enter a vehicle and might be effectively locked out of the marketplace. All of this is not to say that category management is without merit. We certainly do not want agencies using less efficient, more expensive procurement processes. However, if small firms with a history of offering quality services are being locked out, we must consider if this initiative is achieving the intended result. During today's hearing, I look forward to hearing about challenges facing small contractors and potential solutions. Doing so is not only essential for small firms and our nation's industrial base, but the overall economy. I want to thank witnesses for being here today. I yield the balance of my time. And Mr. Chairman, I would like to say hello to Anastasia McEwen, a New York University student who was my district intern, currently in the audience. Welcome. Thank you. I yield back.
Thank you. The gentlelady yields back, and if committee members have an opening statement prepared, I ask that they be submitted for the records. And I'll take just a moment to explain our rules here, timing particular. We operate under the 5-minute rule. Each of you will have an opportunity to talk for 5 minutes, and there'll be a light on there for 4 of those minutes. It's green. It'll go to yellow when you have 1 minute to wrap up, then the red light will come on. And we'd ask that you try to stay within those constraints if at all possible. And we operate the same way. There'll be 5-minute questions, and we will stay within those parameters also. And I'd now like to introduce our distinguished panel here today. Ms. Shirley Bailey is testifying in her capacity as board chair of the Hub Zone Contractors National Council. Ms. Bailey appeared before this committee last year discussing legislative reforms of the Hub Zone program undertaken by this committee, and we welcome you back today. Our second witness will be Alan Chapotkin. Am I pronouncing that correct? Thank you. He's also a familiar face of the committee and is testifying today in his role as the Vice President and Counsel of the Professional Services Council, where he is responsible for legislative and regulatory policy. Mr. Chapotkin brings extensive experience on a multitude of small business contracting issues, and we appreciate your expertise and thank you for your testimony to begin shortly. Our third witness is Ms. Beth Laurie Strum, correct? Ms. Strum has over 20 years of experience advising and supporting contractors and government agencies on policy development and project management. She currently serves as the Vice President of the Business Development for Volano. Pardon me? Volano, sorry about that. Volano, formerly known as It Works, a women-owned small business located in Washington, D.C. Volano has successfully delivered innovative solutions to the transportation industry over the past 15 years. We welcome you here also. And I would now yield to the ranking member for the purpose of introducing our fourth and final witness.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It is my pleasure to introduce Ms. M.L. Mackey, CEO of Beacon Interactive Systems, a company she co-founded in 1994. Prior to starting her company, she worked as an engineer at Digital Equipment Corporation, where she was on both hardware and software teams. Ms. Mackey is the past chair of the NDIA, National Small Business Conference. She is a powerful advocate for women in business and a winner of the Women Entrepreneurs in Science and Technology Leadership Award. Ms. Mackey holds a B.S. in Electrical Engineering from Lehigh University. Welcome and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Ms. Mackey. And Ms. Bailey, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Chairman Chavit, Ranking Member Velasquez, and members of the committee, my name is Shirley Bailey, and I appreciate the opportunity to be here today to provide testimony on behalf of the Hub Zone Contractors National Council. I am also CEO and managing member of MSC Management Services, LLC, a women-owned Hub Zone small business located in Garrett County, Maryland. Today's topic, the effect of category management on small businesses, is a policy that greatly concerns the Council. The cause for concern is pretty simple: small business access to contracts. But understanding category management has been difficult because there are so many moving parts and confusing terms. Category management is another iteration of the government's desire to consolidate purchases to achieve cost savings. Since 1997, Congress and small business advocates have raised concerns about the effect procurement initiatives have on small businesses. In 2005, the OMB directed agencies to use strategic sourcing and established the Federal Strategic Sourcing Initiative program to manage government-wide efforts. Strategic sourcing has now morphed into category management. So here we are today raising the same objections that these practices shut out small businesses. Category management breaks federal buy-in into 10 categories, assigning different agencies the lead. The government has put contracting vehicles in 4 categories. Tier 0, which are direct contracts with companies or termed local by the OMB. Tier 1, agency-wide contracts. Tier 2, government-wide contracts. Tier 3, best-in-class contracts. The President's management agenda set 2 goals for federal agencies in fiscal year 18. The first, a 20% requirement for agencies to move contracts in Tier 0 to agency-wide or government-wide contracts. The second goal is to move 35% of existing contracts in Tier 2 and 3 to best-in-class. Currently, there are 36 big contract vehicles identified on the GSA acquisition gateway. These vehicles totaled approximately $27 billion in spend in fiscal year 2017. Not to be forgotten is the President's management agenda's goal of meeting small business goals. According to the PMA, achievement of category management goals is not an excuse for missing an agency's small business goal. Every agency is expected to work with solution providers and small business offices at the agency to meet or exceed the baseline. We are gratified that the small business goals apply to the agencies and category management. That being said, the HUBZone Council believes that relying on agency-wide or government-wide contracts erects barriers to small businesses. We want to raise the following concerns. 1, as the government moves away from direct contract with businesses, the Tier 0 opportunities decrease for smaller businesses. The vehicles used in category management require substantial resources to bid and to win task orders. These contract vehicles do not lend themselves to small businesses trying to enter the market. So our concern is pretty obvious. A strong industrial base requires a continuous pipeline of emerging companies with innovative solutions. 2, most big dollars go to a small share of companies, meaning the same ones continue on managed contracts. In fiscal year 2017, just 4.3% of big contract holders received 80% of all big dollars. Also in fiscal year 2017, 63.5% of the fiscal year 2013 incumbents received 91% of big spending. This is counter to other government procurement objectives that seek to diversify the small business base that performs in the federal marketplace. 3, we are concerned that category management consolidates contracts into larger and longer-term contracts and task orders with limited, if any, on-ramping provisions. If the government is going to issue larger and longer-term contracts and task orders, small business size standards and certification processes must reflect this new reality, and the contracts should provide on-ramping to ensure adequate competition and representation of all social economic classifications within contract vehicles. 4, the criteria for a contract vehicle to be designated as best-in-class is unclear, and we are unsure whether or not there will be consistent criteria across contract vehicles. The term itself, best-in-class, also raises concern. 5, the Council believes the government policy of counting a company with more than one certification multiple times skews the reporting data. For example, 75% of all HUBZone dollars credited towards goals are solicited under other set-asides. We suggest Congress take a look at this policy so that the true number of contracts awarded to social economic set-aside programs is accurate. In conclusion, no one would disagree with the goals of efficient government buy-in and saving the taxpayer money. However, we believe that category management comes at a cost. Fewer small business awards not only limits the supply of vendors to the government, the ripple effect limits the ability of small businesses to grow through federal contracting. In our view, category management will make reaching government-wide small business goals even more difficult. The utilization of HUBZone companies already poses a problem for the government. It has never reached the 3% goal. Further limiting contract competition to utilize only multiple award contracts through category management will have a devastating effect on small business participation in federal contracting. The Congress urges this committee to exercise its authority to ensure the government's procurement policies and implementation of such policies, specifically category management, utilizes small business to the maximum extent practicable rather than limiting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chvatkin, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the invitation to the Professional Services Council to testify today. Category management has evolved through 4 major phases. It began as a federal initiative intended to develop and provide the federal acquisition community with more efficient acquisition strategies based on major categories of federal procurement. It has transitioned into a combination of both management information analysis and federal purchasing strategies. Last November, Mr. Chairman, you and the ranking member wrote to the Office of Management and Budget challenging the implementation of category management and raising concerns about the ability of small business to fully and fairly compete for federal contracts. Those concerns remain valid. The first phase, as I see it, of category management was the establishment of the program. It was intended to provide acquisition executives with better visibility into agencies' spend and thereby enable the federal government to approach the purchase of goods and services as if the federal government were a single enterprise. PSC has supported and continues to support these goals, even though the metrics for success are hard to articulate and even harder to validate. The second phase was the determination by OMB that certain contract vehicles satisfy key criteria defined by OMB to earn the designation of best in class. As of April 23rd, 32 contracts have been designated as best-in-class awards. But it's also important to recognize that many of these best-in-class contracts have very specific scopes of work or have limited application in the federal procurement world. The third phase was the imposition of agency quotas for spending through category management principles, referred to as spend under management. Agency contract spend through any of the 3 tiers of OMB-designated contracts counts as spend under management. Where agency contract dollars are obligated through contracts that do not fit into any of these categories, awards are designated as unmanaged, and the agencies are urged to do more to bring those opportunities under that spend under management concept. OMB, as you know, has established government-wide targets of awarding 35% of available spend through best-in-class contracts and decreasing the available spend categorized as unmanaged by 20%. But nothing, just to remind the committee, nothing in the category management evolution alters the agency's responsibility to achieve their individually negotiated small business contracting and subcontracting goals pursuant to the Small Business Act. The fourth phase, and for us the most troubling, is the requirement for the mandatory use of specifically designated best-in-class contracts. These vehicles are the exclusive method by which agencies must purchase goods and services. As of February, only 6 contracts across 4 of the 10 categories in the category management ecosystem have been designated for mandatory use. Mandatory use of certain contracts is certainly not new, but it remains controversial. With CM's focus on lowering prices, PSC is concerned that the government may begin to purchase complex services in the same manner as common office supplies, which will limit the value and reduce the innovation available to the agencies. In addition, as this committee has previously addressed, these techniques may have the effect of limiting the number of firms, small or other than small, able to compete for the specific goods or services provided for under these mandatory use and spend under management contracts. 5 years ago today, PSC testified before this committee on the use of strategic sourcing. We stated that the government's goal should be to foster an environment of robust competition, higher performance, agility, innovation, balanced opportunity for companies of all sizes, and accountability. We cautioned then, and we do so again today, that more needs to be done to prevent the unintended consequences on the small and other than smaller companies that are or are capable of meeting the government's needs. Particularly as category management has transitioned into a procurement policy, there have been negative consequences for the supplier base and for the marketplace. Additionally, many of these competitions and awards for what are now designated as best-in-class contracts occurred before the best-in-class designation was even made, and certainly in many cases before any mandatory use designation was established. This raises 2 additional important questions. Are the contracts structured in a way to provide on-ramps for companies who are not currently a holder of that vehicle? And secondly, when a best-in-class contract is recompeted, will non-contract holders be able to successfully compete for any of the future opportunities? On behalf of the Professional Services Council and our members, I thank you for your attention in holding this hearing on this important issue. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you very much. Ms. Strum, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Vasquez, members of the House Small Business Committee, thank you for the opportunity to speak here today. To begin, I must convey to you a fervent message of concern from the U.S. Women's Chamber of Commerce. We have never encountered a threat to small business full and fair access to federal contracts like what is confronting us now. The anti-competitive contracting practice known as category management through best-in-class acquisition vehicles has been quickly, summarily, and without consideration and regulatory authority inserted in front of the federal acquisition practice, seemingly as a predicate to the existing FAR and requirements of the Small Business Act. In its current form, the best-in-class acquisition process picks winners and losers without assuring full and fair competition, thereby locking out thousands of small businesses from the very contract opportunities that were guaranteed us through the Small Business Act. The abrupt transformation of the federal acquisition process to best-in-class vehicles will have a crippling effect on small business competitive opportunities. For example, roughly 25,000 small businesses provide IT services to the federal government, but only approximately 200 have the IT vehicles currently deemed best in class. Locking out 99% of small businesses from prime contractor competitive opportunities will have a devastating effect on the small business industrial base. How can the federal government possibly claim to be providing the maximum practicable opportunity for small business concerns? This new process has been rushed so quickly into the acquisition system without clarity, regulations, or training that contracting officers have not received the information or training they need. Many contracting officers think they must exclusively use vehicles designated as best in class. Some agency-level contract vehicles have not been named best in class, while others have received this designation. Winners and losers are being selected without competition, adherence to the FAR and Small Business Act, or consideration of the nuanced needs of individual agencies, offices, and regions. If a small business is not already on one of the anointed best-in-class vehicles, they are left out, literally, of the competitive pool. Consequently, while large dollar amounts may end up flowing to a very few small businesses who are on these selected best-in-class vehicles, hundreds of good, viable small companies will be totally shut out for competing. For example, Oasis, one of the GSA best-in-class vehicles, has pools with only 40 businesses per pool. Alliant 2, which was just awarded, has only 80 small businesses. Some best-in-class vehicles are 10-year contracts. So those companies are left out from competing for 10 years. If you are not on the vehicle today, you must wait 5 years for the small business on-ramp to secure the right to compete. And some of these best-in-class vehicles don't have an on-ramp. There are existing acquisition vehicles and methods that could have been used to achieve government acquisition savings while assuring maximum practicable competitive opportunities for small businesses. However, the rush into category management without assuring the Small Business Act requirements are met, without assuring strong and open competitive field of firms remain engaged with real incentives to lower prices, and without assuring that the needs and nuances of agencies are met through the acquisition process. Examples of good competitive methods include the GSA multiple schedules, but the use of these schedules has decreased by agencies over the last few years. An IDIQ created for an entire department with more frequent on-ramps could also satisfy category management requirements. Small businesses need your help now to assure we secure maximum opportunities as federal suppliers. We ask you to compel increased training from the top of acquisition leadership down to the frontline contracting officers to assure they understand that category management and best-in-class vehicles do not supersede our existing laws and regulations. We need an easily accessible database of available vehicles so that small businesses and contracting officers know the full array of vehicles available to them rather than just best in class. Thank you for your support of the American small business industrial base.
Thank you very much. Ms. Mackey, you're recognized for 5 minutes.
Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, and other members of the committee, thank you for letting me give me the opportunity today to testify before you. And I also want to thank you for your consistent efforts in supporting America's small business community. My name is M.L. Mackey. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Beacon Interactive Systems, a small business with offices in Waltham, Massachusetts, and Norfolk, Virginia. Beacon delivers innovative, efficiency-improving, and cost-savings technology for the Department of Defense. Today, I'm representing the National Small Business the Small Business Division of the National Defense Industrial Association. Have you ever been so vain you don't wear your reading glasses, but you really should have? Is there any way to cut that? Okay. The Small Business Division of the National Defense Industrial Association, with a membership of nearly 1,600 corporate and over 80,000 individual members. While category management greatly impacts the full spectrum of the U.S. industrial supply chain, my testimony this afternoon will focus on the constraints that it places on small businesses trying to deliver innovative solutions to support the U.S. warfighter at home and abroad. The intent of making government procurement efficient, streamlined, and cost-effective is a goal with which I and my small business colleagues are aligned. Getting best-in-breed products and services as rapidly as possible to the men and women who protect us is of paramount importance. Unfortunately, the contract approach prescribed by category management will have an opposite and deleterious effect on this goal. It drastically reduces competition within the existing supply chain and creates a tremendous barrier for new contractors to participate and deliver the valuable innovations necessary. As battle space needs evolve even more rapidly, so too must acquisition processes evolve on both cost and capability vectors. Category management, by only addressing costs through contracting requirements, ignores the overwhelming need and value of innovation. Without thoughtful implementation, the acquisition of innovation is unplanned, disruptive, fluid, and in the past has been costly. A cost-only approach to contracting does not incentivize industry to explore innovation or longer-term solutions because contract requirements sacrifice taking new approaches in order to cut costs. As the owner of a small business that provides cutting-edge Internet of Things IoT technology to solve many of the DoD's mission-critical operational needs, the myopic approach of limiting access to contract vehicles simply as an attempt to limit cost will make it even more difficult for the innovation economy to participate. Category management, through the practice of strategic sourcing, would consolidate the number of contracts the federal government awards to small businesses. As an approach to cost savings, it is well-intentioned, but it unfortunately drives high-technology small businesses out of the federal marketplace, resulting in reduced competition within the procurement process and the loss of small businesses who choose creating innovation over building a business based on cutting corners and costs. An additional impact of category management is that small businesses must align themselves with prime contractors on a cost basis, as opposed to value or capability, to even be able to engage with the government. Small businesses must be recognized as more than just a reliable supply chain for larger companies to utilize in their own cost savings approaches. The small business community represents the valuable marketplace of ideas and innovation. Category management, like lowest price technically acceptable LPTA methods, when applied to broad acquisition, does not consider that innovation is an aberration to standard government contracting requirements, yet provides incredible value. One of the stated laudable intents of category management is to accomplish a streamlined best-of-breed acquisition practice. The Small Business Innovation Research, SBIR, and the Small Business Technology Transfer Programs are examples of where the small business community delivers directly on this intent. Technology acquired from the SBIR program is an example of accessing best-of-breed solutions in a streamlined manner. During the development phases of the SBIR investment, I shouldn't speak slang, SBIR investment phases 1 and 2, the needs of the warfighter are explicitly addressed with new and innovative approaches. Furthermore, acquisition of the resulting SBIR phase 3 goods and services is streamlined as the competitive threshold has already been met in the highly competitive phase 1 and phase 2 processes. Instead of helping, category management will impinge on the ability of the U.S. government to acquire these results by limiting access to contract vehicles. Across the board, my small business colleagues are overwhelmingly opposed to the category management approach. Anything that winnows down the ability to compete on a fair and level playing field across the industrial base and makes it especially difficult for small businesses. We have a couple recommendations that we think might actually address some of the intent of the category management approach. We have 3, in fact. One is Support the contracting community with increased funding in order to provide the resources necessary to enable innovation and widespread small business participation within the contracting process. 2, reevaluate LPTA with an eye towards focusing on how to best procure what will meet the evolving needs of the warfighter. Focus on what is the best value, not as what is the least expensive acquisition. 3rd, develop and deliver best-of-breed innovative goods and services and a streamlined acquisition process by implementing a pilot program at the DoD for SBIR Phase 3 transitions as described in Section 1710 of the 2018 NDAA. Chairman Chabot, Ranking Member Velasquez, and members of the committee, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you this morning, and thank you for your continued efforts in supporting the small business community. I look forward to answering any questions you may have.
Thank you very much, and I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. And Ms. Bailey, I'll start with you. Could you describe the impact that these category management 20% and 35% goals might have on emerging small businesses?
Yes, thank you. I think that with the idea that you're going to be transitioning to these more sophisticated contracts where they have more increased requirements and past performance requirements, emerging small businesses won't tend to have that type of experience, and you're going to leave out those innovative solutions into those contract vehicles and their opportunity to compete.
Thank you very much. Mr. Schwatkin, I'll go to you next. It seems that the spend under management and mandatory best-in-class approach may require more nuance than is currently being applied. For example, as you mentioned, it makes little sense to procure complex weapons systems the same way one would buy office supplies. What can Congress and this committee specifically do to help bring about a more tailored approach to best-in-class use?
Well, Mr. Chairman, thank you. There's a number of techniques and approaches you can have. Some of them are through the oversight such as you're doing. You've also initiated a number of pilot programs. I talked earlier about some of the burdens in past performance, and this committee was a lead in enacting a provision for a pilot program on small business past performance reporting and capabilities through the SBA, and they just issued some preliminary information on that. So I think addressing these symptoms is not enough. I think the core here is whether the mandatory use makes sense as a federal government, even across the limited number of companies, and will the contracts provide continuing opportunities for new and emerging firms to join in. I think those on-ramps are very, very important, and many of the emerging contracts do not have that capability today.
Thank you very much. Ms. Strom, I'll go to you next. You mentioned that there are alternative contracting vehicles and methods that can be used to achieve cost savings while protecting opportunities for small businesses. Can you provide some examples and describe how they are more advantageous than the current policy?
So for example, GSA has schedules. So you've got IT 70, which is an IT schedule. When you're on the schedule, you're supposed to have provided your best price to GSA. Also, GSA has 874, which is a professional services schedule. What is the conflict between OASIS, which is a professional services best-in-class vehicle, and 874, which is a professional services schedule? Why buy through OASIS versus buy through the GSA schedule?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Sure.
Ms. Mackey, given your experience with past federal initiatives such as strategic sourcing, how does this current category management strategy compare with past initiatives?
Unfortunately, it's very familiar. So I've been running and working in the Legislative Affairs Policy area for NDIA Small Business Division for the last 9 or 10 years. Mm-hmm. And it's come through once or twice, and I can't convey to you enough the people that worked through that FSSI challenges before, who either sent me emails or came and talked to me with the slumped shoulders of, here we go again kind of thing. It's really got a dramatic effect on small business. And one of the things that we need to keep in mind when we think about small business is, you know, that joke about deep pockets or short pockets. Like it's important to think that small businesses have short pockets. It's really hard for us to weather protracted delays. It's really hard to build up again and be able to move it forward. And just with a little bit of compassion for the owners of small businesses, often we manage those dips and valleys on our own personal expense. And if we're federal contractors, they're not things that are allowable expenses then when we get back on track. So there's just this large attenuation at the end of the whip that's really, really hard for the small business part of the industrial base to recover from.
Thank you very much. I'll yield back my time, and the ranking member, gentlelady from New York, is recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Mackey, the contribution of small businesses to R&D and innovation as a whole has long been recognized as critical to our economy and national security. Yet it has been noted that contracting in this sphere of the DoD is on the decline, along with a general underutilization of the SBIR, STTR programs. Can you explain what this trend means for the industrial base and what implementing category management means for innovative companies like your own?
So the strain on the industrial base, the defense industrial base, the federal marketplace, is that my colleagues in Boston, my friends in San Francisco that work in well-known innovation areas, they don't participate because it's too hard, it's too difficult. It's not too difficult sometimes to get started, you know, with some of the on-ramps for small business and R&D, some of the initial maybe SBIR Phase 1 awards that you get. It's really hard to move beyond that to market launch, either within the federal space or many of them will take investment from SBIR and move back into the private sector. So I personally would like to see SBIR and small business R&D used for what it was intended for, to funnel innovation to our federal customers as well as leverage into the economy. So that's the impact on the industrial base of category management is difficult in that it keeps people from wanting to play. So that's the first question I think you asked
Yes,
me.
and how can we reverse this trend?
Yeah.
What can we do here? What type of recommendations could you offer?
So from our personal experience, we've been able to take SBIR investments and translate them through to Navy Defense Business Systems. So that's a market launch in the Department of Defense. We're working with private sector and taking it there. I can tell you from our experience, the most difficult thing, the thing that you could do that mitigate for others, is make contracting easier. It's the exact opposite of category management. So I can share from our personal experience. If you're interested, I could give you just a quick couple examples. We go and talk to contracting officers when program officers want our technology, when fleet wants our technology. We work a lot with the U.S. Navy. When directives come out that say, if only we had this capability, and the SBIR pipeline says, great, we've developed this for you, and they can't get us under contract. And when I go and say it should be easy, it's follow-on work for SBIR, they have no idea how to act on that. So I think one of the things, I have two concrete suggestions if I could. One is, let's make centers of excellence around SBIR follow-on contracting so that we don't put the contracting officers at risk to do something new and different when they are the people that are supposed to be careful of not new and different so that bad things don't happen. The second is, I think it might be really interesting to understand that SBIR technology, goods and services can be offered as government-furnished equipment, GFE, on the larger proposals. So they don't necessarily, you can put the acquisition program out, but you say this piece will be GFE, and understand that as an SBIR follow-on. I'm hoping those two suggestions might be helpful.
Thank you. Ms. Strom, despite the numerous safeguards in place, we continue to see bundling and consolidation of contracts. In your opinion, is the consolidation or bundling of contracts under category management being used to ease administrative burdens in the procurement process?
I think that that's okay, though. I think having these large IDIQ, or indefinite delivery, indefinite quantity contracts, and then having task orders under them is okay. I think having them agency-wide or department-wide is okay, and I think you can achieve the efficiencies and the cost savings through them that the government is looking for. And as a taxpayer, I'm all about, cost savings, right? But I think when you have them as these best in class with 10-year contracts with no on ramps, and you're really keeping the small businesses out of it, I think that's when you start having the issues.
Ms. Blaley, enforcement actions are rare, and there is a need for defining realistic enforcement triggers. I would like to hear if you have any recommendation to be a sufficient trigger. What would you recommend?
As a sufficient trigger for the enforcement of this, I think that, you're putting a lot of those processes in place right now with the reporting of subcontract type of activities. I think we need more enforcement on the large businesses to encourage the small business participation. But also, I think that from the agency perspectives on these contracts, we really need to start looking below the layers of just the small business goaling, and to look at to make sure that we're hitting all of the social economic goals, and also from the aspect of us using these multiple certifications to obtain these goals. I think we're skewing that even further, because you're seeing that fewer companies are able to participate. So you may see that all of the goals are met, but if they're met by one company achieving all 3 certifications or 4 certifications, it's doing a disservice as well. So I think we need to start layering back and looking at that detail as well.
Any short, brief comment on that same question?
On the enforcement question?
Yes.
Yes, ma'am. I think it's important that we look at the holding the agencies accountable. And what the challenge here is that the agencies are losing the flexibility on their own when their best-in-class contracts and objectives, top-down objectives, are set. So I think the key is, as you suggest, and I don't have a ready answer for what the enforcement actions are to be, but I believe that the agencies do not have enough responsibility for meeting the small business objectives that they have.
The gentleman's
I'd work
time
on that with
expired.
you.
Thank you, Mr.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Gentleman's
Yield back.
time expired. The gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Lukemeyer, who's the vice chairman of this committee, is recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you for being here today. Kind of curious, is there an ability by small businesses to partner with a larger entity to be sort of a subcontractor on the main contract? Is there, Ms. Strum?
If I may,
Yeah.
there's always an ability to do that. What that does is it decreases our revenue. It decreases the ability to go after prime contracts and be a prime contractor. And on the best-in-class contracts, the only way to get on them is to have prime contract past performance.
Okay, is there an ability of a number of small businesses to sort of work together, to partner together to be able to get a bigger contract?
There is that Congress has given the authority to the agencies. It's called for companies that are quote unquote similarly situated. If 4 women-owned small businesses were to come together, the statutory authority gives them the ability to bid as one, bringing the capabilities together.
Do they do that?
I'm sorry?
Do they do it? Do they take advantage of that provision?
Well, the Small Business Administration has issued the regulations for that. The Federal Acquisition Regulation, which is what the contracting community reads, has not yet been issued. So we're waiting 3.5 years, I think, since the law has been passed to see the Federal Acquisition Regulation issued. So some agencies are testing that on their own, most are not. And there's also, this committee was very actively involved in creating the Mentor Protege program, and the All-Agency Mentor Protege program. That's another way that large businesses and small businesses can come together and essentially share in that prime contract responsibility.
You know, each of you is not too happy with the process. I understand it. I agree with you. But is there a way for contract management to coexist with small business access to government contracts? Is there a way to get that done? Ms. Bailey?
Yes, I think that if we look at increasing the number of set-aside vehicles within these vehicles, so that you have the small business set-aside programs being representative adequately through separate vehicles within each one of these best-in-class contract vehicles. And also to reduce the restrictions for initial entry into these, so that you can get the emerging contractors in there and have more on-ramping and more frequent on-ramping to enable the newer companies to get in there in a timely manner.
Have you seen with the implementation of this that there's been a disruption of the supply pipeline for different businesses to the government because of the inability of a contractor to do what you're trying to do, or it's all going to one, or the small guys can't get there?
Yeah,
Have you seen a
so-
disruption of the?
So there's definitely a disruption. So you'll see a lot of the work that you're trying to go after. You'll be talking to different agencies, and they'll say, "Yeah, we're going to put this RFP on the street," and then it goes on one of the best-in-class vehicles that you're not on. So the disruption happens where you're not on the vehicle, and you're looking then for a partner that's on that vehicle, so then you can sub to them, and sometimes that doesn't work out. And so you lose out on business that you know about, that you're talking to the client about, that you're trying to capture, and then it goes on these vehicles that you're not able to bid on.
Have you seen where the government is trying to get these contracts issued and request for different supplies and product? Have you seen them not be able to get as much stuff as they want, or to have a competitive bid? Yes, Ms. Mackey.
So we deliver the operational energy management system for shipboard Navy use, and they are ready for it. We deliver the safety system for the Navy, and the contracting delays and the process that we have to get through holds I can give you our example, holds our technology up from getting from them, and the fleet has expressed frustration about not being able to get to it quickly. I can also share some of my colleagues' experience at NDIA where they are not able to deliver on their products, and we can get you more information if you'd like on that, if that would be
Okay.
helpful.
Fantastic.
If I could just add one item,
Yes, sir.
sir. The biggest challenge we have right now is in the transition, the designation of best-in-class contracts has come after the awards, and the determination for mandatory use has been after the contracts have already been awarded. And so we're in an interesting transition period in the evolution of category management. I think if the OMB, and they're well aware of the need, if they could designate those contracts in advance of the solicitation, then companies would know where to bid, or that this contract is a best in class. Today, those companies had no knowledge that the contract was going to be designated, or the agencies would be using it in that manner.
Thank you very much. My time has expired.
Thank you. Gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Evans, who's the ranking member of the Subcommittee on Economic Growth, Tax, and Capital Access, recognized 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want this question probably to go to every person. Start out with Ms. Strong. And this is what I've heard. If you want to secure the industrial base, what changes should be made when using category management? I kind of heard that. Can you speak to that?
Do you mean what do I recommend as
Yes.
changes?
Yes.
So I think, for example, I've been working with NOAA, for example, on an IDIQ that they've been trying to put out for small business to replace an IDIQ that they currently have out. And rumor has it that GSA is pushing them to use OASIS for it. They feel compelled to use OASIS. It seems to them to be mandatory, and they may not end up putting out their own IDIQ. The changes that I believe need to be put in place is education to the contracting officers so that they understand that these best-in-class vehicles are not mandatory, that they can put out their own vehicles. Now, for category management purposes, that vehicle should be able to be used for all of NOAA, for maybe even all of Commerce. And it's an IT vehicle, and why not let all of Commerce use it? And that satisfies the category management requirement. Does that
Yes.
answer your question?
Others want to respond?
So one way to think of changing category management is to maybe look at Section 1710 of the NDAA last year that said, let's pilot a contract vehicle, perhaps in one of these centers of excellence, that is already best of breed in a way that is has a fluid on-ramp to it, that just by completing your Phase 2, you can become part of that contracting opportunity. So I think combining some of the best of things that have gone before. Seaport E has the ability to on-ramp frequently and has wide openings to it. Putting that with a best-of-breed contract. I also think that category management is just difficult. I think we're missing the point of we really need to be supporting the contracting offices with enough resources to be able to effectively meet the requirements levied on them for a diverse inclusion of the industrial base. Forgive me for editorializing.
No. Yes.
I think to follow on with them as well is if you look at the categories that we have in category management, maybe one of the things is to break those things down to the subcategories and look at issuing vehicles at those subcategory levels, which would enable more small businesses to be able to participate rather than looking at the whole entire category as a whole.
Yes. Thoughts?
Thank you, Mr. Evans. You know, the industrial base, in quotes, and that includes both the services, the products, it's changing so rapidly. One of the issues in category management is it freezes the contract and the scope of work. And so we ought to, instead of focusing in on achieving arbitrary goals, ought to be, one of the burdens is that it freezes out, it locks the agencies into long-term solutions. I just think there ought to be greater flexibility and certainly staying away from mandatory use because the agency's needs are going to rapidly change, and we're pushing them into a unique and maybe inappropriate vehicles to achieve the solutions they're trying to accomplish.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Thank you very much. The gentleman from Kentucky, Mr. Comer, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My first question is for Ms. Strum. And what options does a small business have if it does not hold a spot on a best-in-class contract? Are subcontracting opportunities or teaming opportunities available for such companies?
Yes, I mean, you can find large businesses and small businesses that are on the contract that you can team with. You also can talk to the agencies and make friends with the customers and try to get the work on other vehicles, direct contracts, use the GSA schedules if you have a GSA schedule, if you're a GSA schedule holder, sorry, that's the proper term. There are other avenues to contracting.
How difficult is it for someone to get their foot in the door to have a subcontracting or a teaming opportunity?
It's a matter of networking.
Mm-hmm.
Difficulty is in the eye of the beholder.
Right. Ms. Bailey, let me ask you a question. Given the federal government has never met its 3% hub zone goal, and I'm a big proponent of hub zone, do you think category management will make it even more difficult for agencies to achieve this goal?
Yes, absolutely. One of the major recommendations I have that is if you're going to continue along this line is to have specific set-asides for hub zone firms and to make sure that there are adequate competition and number of firms in those hub zone set-asides. With the hub zone, compliance is also an issue, and if you don't have a hub zone prime contract, then you don't have the benefit of attempt to maintain in order to maintain compliance and allow you to get back up to compliance when you do have an award. So,
While we've heard of the many dangers category management potentially imposes on small businesses, can you think of any benefits this strategy might have for small businesses? I'm switching gears here.
well, I think that from the education, if the education gets out and all of the information of pricing of the goods and materials and individuals have access to that information, it may help small businesses strategize on where to go and which vehicles and the cost patterns that they've got to get into. The problem with entering into the federal marketplace is if you don't have past performance, and in most cases as a prime, we're seeing more and more requirements as a prime requirement for past performance, it's very difficult to enter into the market.
So one quick question. I have a little over 2 minutes remaining for all the witnesses. Briefly answer if you can. What can this committee do? What can we do to improve the situation?
I think that the one thing is to really seriously look at making sure that we have adequate on-ramping, frequent on-ramping, that all the socioeconomic categories are represented and that you have vehicles that are specific for those. Mr. Strom?
I would recommend that OMB look very carefully at its future awards, restack whether the current list of best-in-class contracts has sufficient opportunity for small business participation, and then make sure that future awards both have a broad enough scope of work to keep technology refreshed, as well as to bring on future companies through that end run process. Not everyone does that today.
So my recommendation would be to have contracting officers trained in what vehicles are available to them besides the best-in-class vehicles, and possibly even have a database created so that they know what other contracts are out there that they can use to put RFPs on. So whether it's within their own agency or outside their agency, if it's using a GSA schedule, et cetera. But then I would also question how best-in-class is awarded and look at whether or not it's really following the FAR, and if it is, how the on-ramping issues and some of the other issues just in how they are competed.
So I have 3 quick suggestions, 2 tactical, 1 strategic. The first is centers of excellence for contracting, so that people know that are trained, that are together, and can reinforce their learning around different types of contracting. The second is contract vehicles, making sure they're available. Speaking as an innovator who therefore is not planned for necessarily, the ability to have the frequent on-ramps, as mentioned, are really important on those contract vehicles. And the third piece that you asked in terms of what can Congress do, I think making sure that program officers and contracting officers raise the visibility of the successful small business contracts that have happened, how they've happened, and that you are happy that they happened. Help us mitigate the risk by raising visibility to the successful engagements.
Great. Well, thank you all very much. Appreciate your testimony. Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Florida, Mr. Lawson, is the ranking member of Subcommittee on Health and Technology. He's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Welcome to the committee. Several years ago, the federal government set aside a percentage of contracts that small business should receive, somewhere in the neighborhood, according to this text here, around 23%, as compared to the larger firms. Are we able to reach that 23% goal based on all of the testimony that I've heard here this morning? Can you all elaborate on that? Are we capable, under the circumstance we have, to reach those goals, or have we already reached them?
No, we've definitely already reached them, and under category management, and you look at total of dollars, we've exceeded it. The problem is when you start peeling back and looking at how many contractors are receiving that to achieve those goals is the issue. So, for instance, DHS has a first source contract, and they've hit all of their goals. They've done really, really well. But when you look at the number of companies that they had involved in that, for instance, with HubZone, it's 6 companies. They had $842 million spread across 6 companies. So that's what the real issue is when you start looking at the social economic classifications underneath the small business numbers.
Well, if anyone else cared to respond, because that's real interesting. I mean, that's hard to believe, really. Yeah.
So I would respond with adding on to the socioeconomic classes that you look at, because it's important to understand whether you meet goals or not. Are you meeting them in the diversified approach that set-asides intend for, so that there's launching points for us to do further into the marketplace? I would say you should look also at what types of work they're doing. Are we pulling across the industrial base? Are we giving them on-ramps, if you will, into the market from which they can build? And that's our goal, right, is to have a healthy industrial base across small and large, geographically, socioeconomically. So I think looking at the spread of who's doing what and where is important.
Anyone else care to respond?
Mr. Chairman, I would just suggest that this committee really ought to take a look at the larger purpose of the small business programs. Today, the agencies look at those objectives, those goals, and once they achieve it, they stop the awards. And If they achieve it in one area, they're happy as long as it's a numerics game only. And category management is getting in that same position. I think we need to look at how we grow small businesses and how we take advantage of the program as a growth orientation and not as a limitation. And I think that's a larger conversation for another day. But I think I'm concerned that the category management is going to fall into the same trap of numerical goals only, without regard to the who or the what.
Okay, Ms. Stone.
If I may, just one quick comment. In 2017, we missed our women-owned small business goal by $1.28 billion.
That's incredible. And one of the things you said earlier when you were talking about networking, does that contribute a great deal to a lack of participation when you have such a small group that are getting all of the resources?
Definitely, right? So, I mean, a big part of our jobs every day is to go out and talk with companies and meet with companies and do business with other companies. And so some of the gentlemen asked about, can you work with other companies and, sub to other companies as small businesses? Can you, do subcontracting? And of course we can do subcontracting. But in order to bid on contracts, you need to have prime past performances. So a lot of what we do, again, is to make the connections and do the networking. But we also, in order to make money for our companies, we want to have that prime contracting goals.
Right. And back in Florida, being in a government town like I am, oftentimes I hear from African-American firms who say that they can't break in, because of the way things are set up. And I know I don't have enough time to probably go into that today, but just listening to what you all are facing as women, the Chamber of Commerce and so forth, I can understand what obstacles they are faced with. And it shouldn't be any reason to have these obstacles placed for those firms who are trying to break in, are capable of doing good governmental work. But the way it's set up, Mr. Chairman, and eventually we might look at it again, that's what is happening to why a lot of them are complaining. It's simply the way the process is set up. And with that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you very much. The gentleman yields back, and the gentleman from Kansas, Dr. Marshall, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. My first question is for Ms. Strum, and I'm not sure we'll get past my first question. Ms. Strum, been an OBGYN for 25 years. I've been a man in a woman's world. I found myself advocating to make sure that mammograms and pap smears were covered by insurance companies, making sure that women had access to family planning. And now as a congressman, it seems like I continue to focus on a lot of the women issues. Just to kind of briefly describe, what are 2 or 3 the major barriers, the challenges that female businesses have? And if you were in Congress, what would you do about it? If you were Queen, what would you do about it? Give me a specific solution. So I'm just kind of teeing this up, and go ahead and knock it out of the park.
Wow, if I was queen.
Yeah.
Fun.
We had to dream big and think outside the box sometimes.
So I think the challenges are probably similar to what a lot of other small businesses find, whether you're an SD, VOSB, a small disabled veteran-owned business, or if you're a HUBs-owned business. I think we all face a lot of similar challenges. We look specifically for set-asides for women-owned small businesses. That being said, I don't think that the women-owned, the set-asides for women businesses, I'm not saying this correctly, are not coming around as often as maybe they used to be. And some of the ones that are coming around, so my personal experience, my company is a software development company. We do data analytics, and we're not seeing those coming around as often. I'm constantly checking different websites of the different contracts that we are on, and we're not seeing, I'll tell you, we see like janitorial services. We see, we do a lot of work with the FAA, and we'll see things like building a tower, or replacing carpets. And that's just not the stuff that we do. We do software development. I want to see stuff for, they need people that do Java or, you know, things like that. So we're just not seeing the work for requests for work for the things that we do. And so that's been our biggest struggle as of late. We are trying to break into new places in the market, into other agencies. And that in itself is the same struggle that anybody would have trying to break into new places in the market. You know, you have to meet new people, make new networks, that type of thing. Not sure if I answered your question fully.
Yeah, is there anything else you wanted to add to just like plain and simple solutions to the problem before us today, this federal procurement system? Anything that else that you wanted to, that you think is very woman specific that you didn't get to share yet or you want to really emphasize?
I mean, of course, I'd like to see more women-owned set-asides, women-owned business set-asides. But I think when you do these large procurements, these large IDIQ procurements, it's always great to see the small business set-asides, and when you have those small business set-asides, to have specific ones for women-owned small business, for the hub zones, for the SDVOSBs, et cetera. I think that would really help push our numbers and make it to that, you know, that 23% that we've been, you know, looking to achieve. But I think that also helps our numbers in terms of making sure it's not 6 companies getting, you know, I forget what number Ms. Bailey used before in terms of the dollar amounts. But I'm not surprised to hear that because it's not the first time I've heard that.
Okay. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back. The gentlelady from North Carolina, Ms. Adams, who is the ranking member of Subcommittee on Investigations, Oversight, and Regulations. Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your testimony. And I want to follow up on that 6 companies. I'm curious about, were there African-American companies involved there?
Those were all hub zones. I didn't get down to whether or not that they were, but even further on that DHS First Source is you have several of those companies, although you may have several, they are accounting for several of the certifications. So they could very well had several companies that were hitting the 8A, hitting the women-owned, hitting SDVOSB and hub zone. So you're actually, the total number of companies that you look at for the diverse thing is a lot smaller than looking at the total number of contracts issued.
Yeah, we got to do better. So, Ms. Strum, one of the policies that helps to ensure that small businesses receive their fair share was establishing the government-wide 23% goal. And I think we've had some discussion about it, but it also includes the small disadvantaged women and veteran-owned businesses. So how are these businesses, business contractors impacted by this decrease in the contracts?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Well, the contracts have been decreased, isn't that correct?
That's correct.
What's the impact in your opinion?
So what I've seen happen is we have larger dollar amounts and smaller contracts. Is that what you're?
Yes.
Okay. So how has that impacted us in terms of dollars of revenue per company? It's harder to grow your company, right? Because you're not, you've got fewer contracts to go after and bid on and thereby win or lose. And therefore, even though the contracts have more money, so you're seeing yourself making that 23, when I say seeing yourself, the federal government might be making the 23% in total dollars, but there's fewer contracts for the small businesses to go after, and therefore fewer companies are actually helping to achieve that 23%.
Thank you, ma'am. Let's see, Ms. Mackey. Small businesses are innovative and nimble, which is why it's vitally important that the federal government ensure that small businesses are able to compete fully in the category management contracting approach. So how can we work to ensure that the category management approach is ensuring the successful participation of these companies like your own?
So first, the problem with that is that innovation is by its nature unplanned and disruptive, and a category management is a planned approach and a structured approach to contracting that says, at this point, we will need this much. But with innovation, you have a different cycle. So I think to try as directly answer your question, the idea of what we can do with category management, if there was a way to broaden the best of breed definition to include maybe as a first pass just the SBIR technologies, goods and services, that we are allowed to do follow-on contracting because the competition barrier has already been crossed. Perhaps adding sort of a first pass on-ramp that is flexible in its timing nature to the best of breed concept of category management. I'm making this up on the fly. I hope it makes sense. But that concept of bringing the nimble and the fluid to what is structured, you know?
Okay, so insight from each of you or anyone that wants to answer. Low federal funding for Small Business Administration has an impact on the amount of aid and technical assistance they can provide small business owners. So are you seeing an impact on the number of small businesses that are able to compete for contracts due to these effects? And if so, what type? So anybody can answer. Got like 53 seconds.
So I'll tell you that at the SBA, I would love to see more funding go into the Office of Innovation. I can't give you the numbers on the Impact Act. I can give you the impact. I'm not seeing as much outreach to the innovation economy from them. That I would just love to see more of that.
Okay, Ms. Tim.
Especially from the Hub Zone Program Office. I think that more funding from the Hub Zone Program Office to really help companies understand and to educate the contracting groups on the Hub Zone Program and the benefits of the Hub Zone Program, and to encourage firms to be able to issue more Hub Zone set-asides. If there are more Hub Zone set-asides, there are more companies that are going to enter the market.
Very good. Thanks very much, Mr. Chair. You're back.
Thank you very much. Gentlelady's time has expired. The gentleman from New York, Mr. Espaillat, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for your testimony. My question is to Mr. Alan Chubkin. Did I pronounce that right? Let's see. Looking at some of the most recent data available from the past 2 fiscal years, there has been a significant decrease in small businesses' contracting actions. This means, on a whole, that small businesses are either being priced out beyond their capacity, right, what they can meet, when they're able to meet as small businesses, or that the market in which they operate may no longer be viable for them. Is this a trend that you believe is due to a demand for goods and services beyond what small businesses can offer, or have larger companies started to dilute and take away avenues for small businesses in the industry space?
Well, it's a great question. The answer is more complicated. Certainly, there's small businesses have the capabilities, and what we see in the aggregation of contracts into larger and larger dollar value means it puts a greater burden on those companies. There's also some significant rules changes that have an impact on the companies, a shift in how much they can subcontract, a limitation on subcontracting. I don't think there is segments of the marketplace that have been excluded, but what we see in the evolution of the procurement process, whether it be strategic sourcing or the mandatory use, is that larger and larger segments of federal spending are being taken off the marketplace. And because it is an objective to achieve a dollar value only, without regard to how many companies participate, many of the agencies are using that as a way to simply achieve their numerical goals and declare victory.
I see. My next question is, first a statement. We want to support new entrants and the 10-point criteria in category management in a spirit meant to be a tool for greater inclusion of industrial-based entrants. My first question is, with the use of contracting and bundling to meet the minimum benchmark, is it worth revisiting the standard? Any of you that may.
Yes, I really think that is a huge concern, because the larger these contracts are, the smaller companies are not going to have the past performance requirements in order to enter into the market, because we've seen cases where a small business has to have $200 or $300 million contracts in order to be able to be qualified to participate in a bid. Not too many small businesses have those, especially in the NAICS codes that a lot of the small businesses have in professional services and those like. So, I mean, as you bundle and make these larger and make them more restrictive, it's going to only allow the larger small businesses or those who have, significant other past performance to participate.
And so what would be the best help for small businesses in this aspect to become more competitive? What should they be doing? What should we be doing for them to make them more competitive then?
I think that one of the things as far as with the category management, like I said before, is look at breaking down these vehicles into smaller components where they're more specific, where smaller businesses can have past performance to participate in those areas. And by looking at those subcategories, that might enable more of these set-aside vehicles to be used at those levels and be able to participate from all of the social economic classifications.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Gentleman yields back. I think that's all the questioners we have this morning and now into this afternoon. And we want to thank our witness, a very distinguished panel, for all their testimony today. As we've heard the testimony, category management may have vast implications for small businesses and the industrial base that must be monitored closely. We need to continue working together in a bipartisan manner, as this committee virtually always does, to ensure that the federal government acts swiftly and diligently to make sure these outcomes do not occur. And I want to, again, thank the panel for really shedding a lot of light that will help folks on both sides of the aisle on this very important issue. And I would ask unanimous consent that members have 5 legislative days to submit statements and supporting materials for the record without objection so ordered. And if there's no further business to come before this committee, we're adjourned. Thank you very much.